Our mission today is, well, it's arguably the most essential one for modern life. How do you not just survive, but actually win in a world that just refuses to sit still? How do you build anything stable when everything, your job, the market, even you yourself, is in this relentless state of, well, often brutal flux?
That really is the perennial challenge, isn't it? And to answer it, we're going back about 2,500 years back to the man who basically defined the philosophy of change, Heraclitus of Ephesus.
What? They called him the Dark One.
They did, and not because he was evil, but because his wisdom was difficult. It was uncompromising, and it directly contradicted what most people, really wish to believe. He was just utterly convinced that flux, movement, tension, these weren't secondary problems to solve. They were the fundamental structural truth of reality itself.
So if you're listening right now and feeling completely overwhelmed by the speed of tech, the instability of your career, or just the sheer volatility everywhere, Heraclitus is basically looking at you and saying, good, you are finally seeing things as they are. Our sources for this deep dive are a fantastic mix. We've got the surviving Heraclitean fragments, of course, some great historical context, and the synthesis of modern minds like Carl Jung, Morgan Housel, and Nassim Taleb, who all owe this massive philosophical debt to Heraclitus.
And our goal today is to extract 5 core actionable principles from the law of impermanence all the way to the hidden order he called the logos. Think of this as your ancient strategy guide for navigating modern chaos.
Yeah, and we're not going to shy away from the really hard parts either. We're going to spend a good amount of time on this idea that the very things you spend your life trying to get rid of, failure, tension, conflict, are actually the necessary engines for your growth. And then we'll get to his most challenging idea, why the vast majority of people willingly choose a life Heraclitus called cattle comfort, and what the alternative really is.
So let's begin. If we're going to understand the Heraclitean strategy, we have to first accept the foundational premise: impermanence.
Okay, let's unpack this. And let's start with the one quote that even people who've never touched a philosophy book probably know. The famous, almost cliche line is, "You cannot step into the same river twice, for it's not the same river, and he's not the same man." We all hear this, we nod, and we move on. But what happens if you actually internalize this as an absolute law of the universe?
It means that every single attempt to hold a moment still, to freeze it, is an act of of psychological and spiritual resistance against the very nature of reality. Nothing is stationary. Not your current triumph, not your deepest despair, not your job description, and certainly not the person you think you know so well. Stability, in that sense of a fixed state, is an illusion.
An illusion our brains create for us.
Exactly. Our brains construct it because the ceaseless, minute-by-minute flux is just too much to process consciously. Heraclitus tells us that real wisdom begins the moment you abandon that soothing lie and just embrace the flow.
And you mentioned this isn't just poetry, it's literal biological law. Let's dig into that. How are we physically flowing rivers?
The he who steps into the river, the you listening right now, is constantly being replaced. Our bodies aren't static objects, they're continuous processes of, dying, recycling, and regenerating.
On a cellular level.
On a constant cellular level. I mean, think about the actual turnover rates. Your stomach lining, it's replaced every 2 to 4 days. Your skin, the very boundary you use to define yourself, is entirely new every few weeks. Even the skeleton, the bedrock of your body, is completely remodeled about every 10 years. Most of the cells in your body right now are less than 7 years old. The actual atoms that made you up a decade ago they're mostly gone.
Wow.
But the deepest flux is in the brain, the process we call neuroplasticity. Every new memory, every new skill, just processing new information is constantly physically altering your neural pathways. The person who had an opinion 30 seconds ago has literally rewired their brain based on what they just heard. You are a verb, not a noun. A process, not a product.
So the you who started listening to this deep dive is factually already gone.
Already gone. Replaced by a slightly altered version with a new set of data and a fractionally different synaptic structure. It's happening right now.
And this is where we run right into what you call Heraclitus's suffering trap. If we accept that we're constantly flowing, why is resisting it the primary cause of our emotional pain?
The suffering comes from clinging. Psychological clinging. You're spending all this energy fighting a current you can't possibly stop. When a relationship ends, the pain is often not the absence in the present moment. It's the desperate clinging to the memory, the fixed photo of how that relationship used to be. When a major professional setback hits, the pain is compounded by the inability to let go of the identity, the title, the success you had 5 years ago. In Heraclitean terms, that person, that identity is dead.
It's inertia, right? We're designed to conserve energy, and letting go of a psychological identity feels like it takes this massive amount of emotional energy.
It does. But what we miss is that maintaining the resistance against reality takes far, far more. Clinging to a static image of a reality that's already gone is just exhausting. You're basically demanding that the universe stop moving so you can feel comfortable. And the universe only has two settings: flow or fire. If you insist on permanence, you are setting yourself up for guaranteed disappointment.
Okay, so let's make this actionable. If flux is the only truth, what does that mean for how we approach our lives, our careers?
Well, the first lesson is actually profoundly liberating. Reinvention is always possible. Why? Because you are already changing anyway. If the past self is dead, then your past mistakes aren't permanent tattoos on your soul. They're just debris left by the river as it flowed past. You can steer the change that is already happening. So stop feeling obligated to be consistent with the person you were at 25. That person doesn't have a claim on you today.
And this speaks directly to the massive shifts we're all seeing in the professional world. The sources really suggest we can't afford to see a career as this single, straight line anymore.
The linear career is obsolete. Heraclitus is telling us the ladder is literally dissolving beneath our feet as we try to climb it. Look at the giants who failed: Kodak, Blockbuster, Nokia. Their failure wasn't stupidity, it was clinging. They clung to a profitable, static business model. They chose stagnation over flux. They waited for the crisis to force a pivot, and by then, the market river had already moved on and left them stranded.
So the lesson there is to invest in something more durable than just a specific skill.
You have to invest in learning ability, your capacity to change. Specific skills, coding languages, marketing trends, whatever, they're perishable. They'll be automated or just become irrelevant in 5 years. But that capacity to embrace new information, integrate it, and shed the old methods, that learning agility, that's what keeps its value.
That's a huge psychological shift, though, moving from I need domain expertise to I need to master general adaptation. The sources say we should be planning for, what, 3 to 5 distinct career chapters?
At least. And this demands proactive transformation. The wisdom is to start the change before the crisis forces you to. If you wait for the layoff notice or the market disruption, you're just reacting. You have zero leverage. But if you initiate the change, learn the new skill, start the side project, pivot while your current job is still safe, then you are riding the river. You're steering the current instead of being swept away by the flood.
Okay, so everything flows. But what creates the force behind that flow? What is the mechanism that ensures this constant movement? That takes us right to the engine of it all, the dynamic tension between opposites.
Yes, if the river is flux, the current that powers it is tension. Heraclitus argued that reality is built on a constant necessary tension between opposing forces. You put it perfectly with the phrase, the way up and the way down are one and the same.
That sounds like a contradiction. And, so much of modern life is dedicated to eliminating opposites. We want success without failure, comfort without struggle, light without darkness. Why is Heraclitus saying that's not just impossible, but a damaging goal?
Because the opposites are not static enemies, you can eliminate one by one. They are two poles of a single functional spectrum. A single process. They define each other. They require each other. Trying to eliminate one is like trying to have a magnet with only a north pole. It's an attempt to eliminate the definition of the other, and by extension, the process of reality itself.
Okay, we have to prove this. Let's start with the big one, life and death. We see them as enemies, as endpoints, but he saw them as a single, codependent process.
Exactly. Imagine if death were structurally impossible. Not just unlikely, but impossible. The concept of life would instantly vanish. It wouldn't be a distinct temporary state defined by its eventual end. It would just be continuous featureless existence. There'd be no meaning to it. And beyond that, biological life actually relies on the constant programmed death of cells apoptosis for renewal and growth. Life isn't just opposed to death. It requires death as a structural component to even function.
Wow, so death isn't the opposite of life. It's a necessary mechanism for life to have definition and the ability to renew itself.
Apply the same logic to achievement, success and failure. If you automatically achieved every single goal, if failure was impossible, the concept of success would be meaningless. There'd be no achievement, no value, no need for skill or courage or persistence. The entire value of victory is created entirely by the possibility of defeat. You cannot get rid of the negative without destroying the positive.
Which is such an important idea for how you think about your own life story, your resume. A life that has no failures or conflicts probably suggests a life that was lived too safely to achieve anything truly valuable.
It suggests a life lived in that cattle comfort we mentioned, avoiding the tension necessary for growth. Heraclitus would say strength requires weakness. I mean, how do we train our muscles? The strength, the thing we want, is literally created by the momentary necessary destruction. The weakness, the failure of muscle fibers under tension. No resistance, no growth. It's a physical law.
We see this in health, too. I was thinking of the hygiene hypothesis, which is completely Heraclitean.
Absolutely. The immune system is a master of this principle. Total cleanliness, a sterile environment, trying to eliminate every single pathogen. What does that create?
Ultimate fragility.
Ultimate fragility. The immune system needs small enemies, controlled exposures to practice on and develop robust health. Without the war of pathogens, the system either malfunctions or, like in autoimmune diseases, it turns its aggression inward on the self.
This feels so counterintuitive, though. We're trained to seek frictionless experiences. If we're always trying to reduce effort and eliminate resistance, why does forcing intentional hardship actually make us more resilient?
Because the goal is not equilibrium. The goal is dynamic movement. By deliberately using contrast, you amplify appreciation and build strength. Think about voluntary hardship, like fasting or taking a cold shower. You're not just doing it for physical health. That temporary deprivation uses the opposition hunger, cold, to make the positive feelings of enjoyment, gratitude, warmth feel so much more intense when you return to them.
So you're saying conflict, setback, opposition, these aren't bugs in the system, they're features.
They are the necessary conditions for change and growth. They are the structural prerequisites that define and create the positive state you actually desire.
So this structure exists in constant tension. But what happens if that tension goes too far in one direction? Do the poles ever swap places? That leads us perfectly into the mechanism of transformation.
The reversal of extremes. The constant tension isn't stable. It's dynamic. It ensures movement. And that movement often leads to an abrupt flip, a reversal. This is what Heraclitus described and what Carl Jung, centuries later, gave a Greek name, enantiodromia. It means running to the opposite.
Right. It's the idea that when any system sits its absolute extreme, it accumulates so much pressure or it loses so much integrity that it starts transforming into its opposite. Jung gave full credit to Heraclitus, saying sooner or later, everything runs into its opposite.
And you see modern thinkers like Morgan Housel observing the exact same physical law in financial markets. His summary is perfect. Extremes in one direction lead to extremes in the other. And for you, the listener, the ability to anticipate this flip, to see the extreme and know the reversal is coming, that's probably the most powerful strategic advantage you can get from Heraclitus.
So let's break down the ways this flip happens, because it seems to work across physics, finance, psychology. The first one is the most intuitive, the exhaustion of energy.
Pure physics. Just picture a pendulum swinging to its maximum height. At the peak, its momentum is exhausted. Physics dictates it has to return toward the opposite extreme. And the bigger the swing in one direction, the higher it climbs, the faster and higher the resulting swing in the other direction will be.
Which in economic terms is the boom-bust cycle.
Right.
Extreme growth, irrational exuberance, it can't last. The system is at its maximum height, but the momentum is gone. The crash is just the pendulum swinging back.
The second mechanism is the accumulation of opposite potential. This is more psychological, what Jung was interested in. When you suppress one quality to an extreme, you're building pressure, like compressing a spring. The energy has to go somewhere. It goes into storage.
This sounds a lot like the Jungian shadow self. Someone who's extremely controlled, repressing all spontaneity, all anger. They look stable on the surface.
But that extreme control is building immense pressure for the opposite to assert itself. Eventually, what happens? An explosive breakdown. A massive chaotic eruption of all the repressed qualities. The extreme suffocating control flips into extreme chaos because the opposite potential accumulated unconsciously and it demanded release. The spring snaps.
And this explains why extreme social policies often fail so spectacularly. Prohibition in the 1920s. The extreme attempt to enforce sobriety created this massive, unforeseen counter-system.
It created organized crime. The extreme suppression of alcohol created massive illegal activity. The pressure for the opposite was just too great for the system to contain.
The third mechanism is fascinating. The loss of meaning through excess. When you push a good thing too far, it becomes its opposite.
Heraclitus saw this with physicians. He said, physicians who cut and burn and in every way torture the sick, then demand payment, since they produce the same effects as the diseases. The healer's excessive zeal turns them into a torturer.
The modern parallel is so obvious. The pursuit of extreme safety, helicopter parenting, for example. The extreme pursuit of safety sounds virtuous, but the excess creates its opposite, extreme fragility. The child can't handle normal life stress because they were never exposed to small enemies. They're safe, but they're profoundly vulnerable.
So the key strategic move is anticipation. This gives you a framework for investing for life that is inherently counter-consensus.
Right. If you can predict the flip, you can position yourself for the counterswing. What are the warning signs? What should I be looking out for?
You listen for the signal that extreme consensus has been reached. When you hear phrases like, "this time it's different," or you see extreme, irrational optimism where everyone agrees on one outcome, that's the pendulum at its maximum height. That's where you, the Heraclitus strategist, start preparing for the reversal.
Which is basically Warren Buffett's whole philosophy.
It is the simplest application of enantiodromia. Be fearful when others are greedy, and greedy when others are fearful. Greed is the extreme. Fear is the opposite. When the majority hits peak greed, that's when you bet on the reversal.
And on a personal level, this means avoiding those self-imposed extremes. All work, no play leads to burnout, which is just a total flip into the opposite state of non-productivity. All spending, no saving leads to poverty. You need that dynamic balance, constant small oscillations to prevent the violent, catastrophic flips that destroy you.
Small, controlled oscillations, regular breaks, minor adjustments. That's the price you pay to prevent the huge, violent swing. You seek the dynamic balance.
Okay, so if the unity of opposites is the structure, and enantiodromia is the mechanism of reversal, what's the energy that drives this whole thing? What is that tension? Heraclitus called it war.
And this is probably his most famous and most challenging declaration. War is the father of all and king of all.
Okay, let's be very clear. He wasn't advocating for literal violence between nations.
No, not at all. He meant conflict, tension, friction, struggle, what he called strife, are the fundamental creative forces in the universe.
So strife is the engine of change.
It's the tireless engine. Peace preserves the old. Tension creates the new. Without friction, systems stagnate and die. Think about a star. A star only exists because of a constant violent war between two huge forces. Gravity pulling inward, trying to collapse it, and thermonuclear fusion pushing outward, trying to explode it. The struggle is the star. If either side wins, the star ceases to exist. The tension is what allows it to burn brightly.
Which means that whenever we seek total comfort, total peace, total agreement, we are actively seeking stagnation.
That is the hard truth. Strife introduces asymmetry, and asymmetry is the precursor to anything new. Nassim Taleb talks about this when he discusses how overreaction leads to innovation. The excess energy and focus released from overreacting to a setback is what drives exponential change.
In other words, crisis provides the fuel and the heat to forge something new. It's a key idea we'll come back to. Morgan Housel captured this so well when he said, "The biggest changes don't happen when everyone is happy. They tend to occur during and after a terrible event."
History is just one long example of this pattern. Take the Great Depression. It was economic war, a period of devastating strife, and yet it was one of the most technologically progressive decades in U.S. history. The pressure forced the creation of things like Social Security, FDIC insurance, the minimum wage things that comfortable times would never have allowed.
And of course, World War II, the ultimate strife-accelerated radar, computing, penicillin. Without that existential pressure, there's no urgency, and so there's no massive disruptive transformation. Strife is a forcing function. But how do we avoid just becoming addicted to crisis? How do we tell the difference between productive strife and just creating unnecessary drama?
That's the critical distinction. Productive strife is focused on a clear objective. It's the resistance required to build a skill or reveal a truth or solve a problem. Unnecessary drama is just ego-driven noise. Productive conflict is the friction of a tough negotiation or defending a good idea against smart opposition. That kind of war sharpens you.
So Heraclitus would say you have to choose your battles.
Choose battles worth fighting. The market, the competition, the difficult project. These are the wars that build your capability. The conflict should be external, aimed at creation, not internal, aimed at avoiding reality.
Which brings us back to the comfort trap. The human tendency is to seek ease. We want to eliminate all friction. But Heraclitus says if you're too comfortable, you are, by definition, not growing.
Comfort is the enemy of transformation. It removes the necessity for change. When a crisis hits your life, a layoff, a business failure, that strife often forces a reevaluation that leads you to a much better place. People in comfortable but unfulfilling jobs rarely leave voluntarily. Conflict sets them free by taking away the easy option.
So the career advice is not just to embrace discomfort, but to actively seek it out.
Actively seek productive discomfort. Choose the difficult project. Ask for the feedback that hurts. Enter the competitive arena. See tension as the curriculum for excellence.
Okay, so the world is constant flux, the river driven by tension, the war. But if everything is just moving and fighting, what stops it all from collapsing into pure chaos? What's the unseen hand directing the flow? That structures the logos.
Yes. If Heraclitus' first teaching was that the world is chaos, his second, deeper teaching was that beneath the chaos is a profound rational order, he said. Though the logos is common to all, most people live as if they had their own private understanding.
The logos is probably the trickiest concept for us to wrap our heads around. It's often just translated as word or logic. How can we define it in a way that reflects its huge cosmic scope?
The logos is the underlying rational pattern, the cosmic reason, the structural intelligence of the universe. And crucially, it's not a conscious planner, not a personal god. It's the structure, the fixed rules, like physics or math or evolution, that governs how the flux and opposition unfold. It's the spontaneous order that emerges from simple rules.
So if the world is a giant computer simulation, the logos is the operating system, the fundamental code.
That is a perfect modern metaphor. Water flows downhill. That's the logos in action. The water isn't trying to find the lowest point, it's just obeying the structural intelligence of gravity. Order emerges without intention.
We see this in human systems too, especially economics. Adam Smith's invisible hand feels very logos-like.
Smith's insight was Heraclitean to its core. He argued that individual, often selfish, actions unintentionally combine to create a collective benefit. The baker trying to make a profit ends up feeding the community. No single person planned this optimal outcome, but the simple rules of supply and demand, the market's logic spontaneously created order. The logos worked through them.
I think that's the real difficulty, though. Seeing the logos, it sounds like we're constantly being tricked by the surface events, the chaos, the noise, and we're missing the structural intelligence underneath.
We are perpetually distracted by the surface. Hegel's idea of the cunning of history is another great example. History uses human ambition, which is often messy and vain, to accomplish outcomes that no individual ever intended.
Like Napoleon.
Exactly. Napoleon's quest for personal glory was driven by pure ambition. But the actual historical outcome of his personal strife was the unintended spread of Enlightenment ideals and the destruction of feudalism across Europe. History's logos used his chaotic ambition to accomplish a massive structural transformation. The pattern worked through the surface conflict.
And this structural intelligence is also obvious in nature, completely separate from us.
Look at evolution. Evolution is pure mechanical logos. It's not intelligent design. It's exquisite design emerging from mechanical processes.
Right.
Random mutation, that's the chaos, combined with selection pressure, that's the strife, produces incredible spontaneous order. No one consciously designed the eye or the camouflage of a praying mantis. It emerged because the simple rule of what works survives operated relentlessly over millions of years.
Okay, so what are the common things that distract us from seeing the logos in our own lives? And what's a practical strategy to wake up, as he would say?
The biggest distractions are ego and immediate emotion. Ego distracts us by making us see what we want to see instead of what is. And immediate emotion, fear, greed, anger distracts us by making the current moment feel like the only reality, which obscures the long-term patterns.
So the mandate is to wake up.
To wake up. Wisdom is seeing the underlying structure. Most people are sleepwalking, living in their own private delusions, clinging to beliefs that contradict reality. You have to intentionally try to grasp the logos, the pattern common to all.
And the practical strategy flows from that. Align. Don't fight.
Precisely. Align your career, your actions with the structural forces, market trends, demographics, fundamental human needs, rather than fighting them with wishful thinking. Trust the process, even when it feels chaotic. When a setback hits, trust that the logos is operating, shaping the system. Your job is to focus on simple fundamentals, solve real problems, provide value, and let the pattern of the universe handle the complexity.
We've now got the 5 big principles: flux, opposition, enantiodromia, strife, and logos. And Heraclitus unified all of them in one master metaphor, which brings everything together. If we could distill this entire worldview into a single image, it would be fire. He said, "This world is an ever-living fire, kindled in measures and quenched in measures."
Fire is the perfect symbol. It embodies all 5 truths. It's constant flux. It's never static. It creates change by consuming and destroying. That's strife. It requires fuel and oxygen. That's opposition. Its intensity has to be balanced in measures. and its whole existence is governed by the physical rules of combustion, logos.
So when he says the world is an ever-living fire, he's giving us a model for how to live dynamically.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And we could pull 3 powerful, actionable lessons from this for how to live a high-value life.
The first one is about transformation. Transform through consumption.
Right. Fire consumes fuel wood, challenges failures, and transforms them into something of higher value. Light and heat. It doesn't just have fuel, it metabolizes it. You have to do the same with your experiences. Don't just have a layoff. Burn that experience into lessons, into capability, into wisdom. If you just resist it, it's unburned, wood-wasted potential and bitterness.
The second lesson, burn in measures. Intensity with sustainability.
A fire that burns too fast just burns out. A fire that burns too slow produces no useful heat. Heraclitus says it's kindled in measures and quenched in measures.
So that's the dynamic balance. Intense sprints of focus, kindling, followed by necessary recovery, quenching.
You move between the poles without collapsing into either extreme. That's how you avoid the violent flips of enantiodromia caused by extremity. That's how the fire becomes ever-living.
And the third lesson, create light, not just heat.
Fire provides light clarity, illumination. It also produces heat energy, activity, busyness. Your work should prioritize creating light for others. Solve problems that help people see clearly. Don't just generate heat activity that serves no ultimate illuminating purpose. The best work, the work that achieves that immortal glory, produces both sustained energy and profound insight.
And all these principles, they're not gentle suggestions. They lead to a very stark, uncompromising choice about how to live your life. Heraclitus saw the world divided into 2 groups, and he saved his harshest language for the comfortable majority.
This deep dive really culminates in the final brutal mandate he issued. He believed that most people fail to grasp the logos because they are prioritizing immediate comfort and avoiding all tension.
He stated it so powerfully. The best choose one thing above all. Immortal glory among mortals, the majority stuff themselves like cattle.
That phrase, stuff themselves like cattle, is just chillingly precise. He meant living entirely for immediate physical gratification, consumption, ease, and avoiding all difficulty. Cattle exist passively, they consume, they follow the herd, and they leave nothing behind. They're forgotten. He believed most humans willingly choose this easy, comfortable, approval-seeking life.
And immortal glory is the opposite. It's not about celebrity, that's just temporary heat. It's about creating significance, something of lasting value, an idea, a company, a profound character that transcends your mortal life.
And achieving that requires the courage to face the strife. Heraclitus knew how hard it was, he said. It's hard to fight against desire. For whatever it wishes, it buys at the price of soul.
That desire for comfort, for the path of least resistance, for approval, it purchases temporary pleasure by selling your potential for true transformation. It's the comfortable job that pays well but means nothing. It's staying put when you know you should move. It's avoiding the challenge. These are the soul-selling choices that lead to the life nobody remembers.
And the path of glory is inherently defined by quality, not by mass, Heraclitus stated. To me, one man is worth 10,000 if he is first rate. Quality trumps quantity. One person who sees the logos clearly and acts with courage outweighs a mass of comfortable, mediocre consensus.
This synthesis gives us the ultimate strategy guide. Let's distill this entire philosophy down into 4 core principles to take away.
First, flow. Adapt faster than you complain. Stop clinging to the past. You are a process. Steer the process.
Second, fight. Embrace wordy conflict and productive tension. Strife is the crucible of transformation. If you are too comfortable, you are not growing.
Third, see the logos. Look for the rational patterns beneath the surface chaos. Align your actions with reality's structure, not with your wishful thinking.
And fourth, choose glory. Do not stuff yourself like cattle. Choose the hard path of meaning and excellence over the easy path of obscurity. Your character is your destiny, and it must be forged in fire. The Heraclitean mindset requires the flexibility of bamboo that bends in the storm, not the rigid strength of the oak that shatters. You now have the ancient strategy guide for navigating modern flux.
You are a process, a river of experiences constantly becoming something new. The world will inevitably apply fire crisis, change, opposition. You have the choice to either be consumed by that fire or to be forged by it.
And here's the final provocative thought to mull over, the single clear choice Heraclitus left us with. The easy path is crowded, safe, and leads to a life nobody remembers. The hard path is lonely, risky, and leads to a life others will study long after you're gone. Which story are you writing right now? The comfortable one or the memorable one? The choice, as always, is yours. Now go out there, apply the principles of flux and strife, and keep swimming towards something worth reaching.